Hi, everybody. I'm April Cummings. This is EDBEAT, and I'm now going to push a magic button so that Patrick Brendel and then Patrick Brendel and I both are on punching skills today. And watch, I can even switch the order around because I like to be, I know, so amazing today. All right, so both mics are unmuted. The cameras are rolling. I'm April Cummings. This is Patrick Brendel, and this is EDBEAT. Hi, everybody.
Hi, April.
It's like, how much coffee did you have today? A little too much, clearly. All right, so this is midterms in the Cayman Islands, and at least for everybody, I think. Is that correct? There's nobody still in school. No. So this gives us a good chance to catch up on a couple of things. Patrick, I know we kind of have a couple of topics we mentioned we were going to talk about, but I did forget to mention that the weekend during which we are taping this episode, lateral flow test, kind of a pilot program, was underway at the John Gray High School gymnasium for a lot of the families who were involved in the recent school outbreaks. So I didn't get a chance to kind of go out and see how it went, but I know there was a lot of activity around that and a lot of parents hoping that they will be able to go back to work or play or whatever the case may be, because quarantine with your kids is not always fun.
Yes, expect lots of photos of people with Q-tips in their noses in the media this coming week.
Instagram, here they come. So it goes. The lateral flow tests for us were touted. Was the press briefing last week? It feels like it was a month ago, but there was one a couple of days ago, and it was touted as sort of the savior of the situation when it comes to local transmission of COVID, at least where our schools and their parents are concerned. The goal is to make it a bit easier and not have to basically lock us up for quite so long should there be a case in one of the schools. So I'd like to see how that works in the long run. I love the idea, though, of not really giving a part of my brain to a swab in order to get tested. So anything that avoids that, I'm cheering for that one.
Yeah, I think the basic idea is, even though the lateral flow tests aren't as accurate as the PCR, which is as close to 100% as they can get, the results are turned around in a matter of minutes than hours. Rather than hours. They're cheaper, and so I think the idea is you do these tests more frequently to screen and hopefully keep people out of quarantine and get them out of isolation faster.
Yeah, and I still have, I've read the same, 15 articles about 2 times each. That's maybe 30. Remind me about my math skills when we get to the CXCs, right? But from my perspective, I've struggled with the idea of the lateral flow test. I was just trying to really understand what they were for. And it seems, I think I might finally have like half grasped it now. If you don't test, if you don't have symptoms, but you're potentially exposed to someone, it really is a way to see more quickly whether you're contagious or at your most contagious, which can be really helpful in deciding whether to go home or whether to not. I mean, or if you're at home, deciding whether to go to school or not. So hopefully it will help minimize and kind of keep things tamped down, if you will.
Yeah, I think of it like an at-home pregnancy test. So it's not the be-all and end-all, but if you want to know right away, that's the one you take. And if you get a positive test, you go see your doctor, and they'll tell you whether or not you have it, whether it's a baby or a virus.
Or in this case, I stay home and call the doctor. Don't want to go. So let's switch topics a bit here. One of the articles or items that you published this week has to do, is it this week or today? Space and time, man. It has to do with, it's kind of a check-in of nonprofit organizations that are centered around education and schools in particular. What have you found?
Well, we've talked a lot about how schools have been affected by COVID, and then other news organizations have kind of talked about how businesses are affected by the pandemic. But as the Cayman Current is an NPO, nonprofit, which relies on support from individual donors, of course, I start thinking about my the Fraternal Order of Charities. So these benevolent organizations who have missions that often involve them going out into the community and into the schools to do their service, and how they've been affected. So I talked to Juliet Austin of Life, and I talked to, scrolling down the story so I don't get it wrong, I talked to Melanie Coffey of Inclusion Cayman, and I spoke to our friend Stacey Van of Feed Our Future, who was a special guest on EDBEAT not too long ago. And they kind of gave varying responses based on their organization's profile. And so Life has been really impacted because, of course, their signature program is having volunteers go read to children in schools. And that's not something they've been able to really do for a while. So Juliet said they've been pivoting to virtual programs, but then also kind of doing things in smaller group settings so that they can abide by the social distancing requirements. And another point that she made that I thought was interesting is this issue of fundraising. And so she said it's been more difficult, whether it's because of the pandemic or the whole economic situation, to get kind of what we call general operations funding. So this is to say fund their staff. They have two salaried employees. So to get money to pay for Life this. So she says for Life, like it's been companies have been far more willing to sponsor individual programs and initiatives. So rather than just giving money to general revenue. And that's actually something we've seen.
So Patrick, I lost you a little bit there. Audio cut out just a wee bit. So sorry to interrupt you. Can you just go back and say that again? You were talking about the general funds, how entities are more willing to generally donate toward a program because that's a feel-good thing, as opposed to the general admin or just the core costs it takes to run and operate a nonprofit.
Yes. So one thing Juliet said is during the pandemic, and it may be because of the virus itself, or it could be economic situation, or it could be a trend. General trend is companies have been more willing to donate to specific programs rather than to donate to cover the general operations of a charity. So general operations really is paying somebody's salary, whereas a program is we're going to donate $10,000 so you can buy books for this school. Now that's just a total made up example.
Yeah.
And I've been seeing this too at the Current. It's been far easier for us to find companies who want to sponsor a specific project rather than for them to come on as like a general sponsor of the organization. And, I don't know if, maybe money is a little bit tighter nowadays because of COVID. And so they want, I can see where you would want your funds to go to something very specific that otherwise wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
And if you didn't give the donation, so maybe it's kind of this direct link between cause and effect that companies are looking for.
So my parents founded a nonprofit back in the 70s. The International College of the Cayman Islands has always been a not-for-profit. And I rolled my eyes. I'm like, and so I heard, this is not unique to this era. It does seem to come in waves, though. There are certain times when corporate entities really do want to sort of show their support behind something very specific that they can tie back to their corporate values, or that is just a feel good for the members of, the employees and the team to see, hey, look, we're helping kids read, but somehow it doesn't sound quite as sexy to say, yes, we're paying for staplers and to keep the lights on in the office. Yeah. So it's not new is what I'm saying, but it seems to be somewhat cyclical. And sometimes it is based on people wanting to get what appears to be the most bang for the buck. So when times are a little bit tighter financially, I do tend to see that trend far more so than in other periods of time. Although sometimes you just get lucky and you find someone who really grasps that those special programs don't exist without the infrastructure that needs to be there year round.
Yeah, exactly. And I think locally, R3 Cayman, the way their application process is structured, they really seem to kind of lead people into asking for funding for specific programs and services rather than general operations. And I don't know if that's true as far as the results are, but I do know that's how the application process is set up. And for people who may not be aware, R3 is kind of taken over as one of, if not the biggest founder, biggest sponsor and supporter of nonprofits in the wake of the pandemic. So, the direction that they're going in is kind of where a lot of the money is going.
Yeah. And so, like you said, it may be set up to focus on specific programs, but I'm not sure necessarily that they're not also seeing the big picture either, because I think they too know that, you have to have a foundation or a core in order to exist. So you mentioned life and Feed Our Future as well. Was there
Yes.
anybody else in the context of this that maybe had a slightly different perspective, or was it all kind of the same general feeling?
Oh no. They're kind of reading from the same book, but maybe in different chapters. And so Inclusion Cayman, for example, their focus is really on protecting their client base and their community, because Inclusion Cayman, which was formerly known as the Special Needs Foundation Cayman, they're dealing with folks who, a lot of them tend to be at a higher risk for the ill effects of COVID. So their focus really is on protecting those clients by wearing the gear and doing the PPE and abiding by social distancing and really trying to keep those folks healthy. An interesting thing that Melanie Coffey from Inclusion Cayman said is her organization has learned a lot from kind of the first wave of the pandemic here in terms of better using technology to serve their clients, whether it's virtual or whatever. But she did say that the technology is kind of a double-edged sword, because while it's helped her organization reach out, like say online, it's also has had an effect of isolating some members of their community. And there's also this, of course, they're all about equal access to whatever it is, work, education. So she's seen that some of this technology, there is unequal access to it from some of their clients. And then finally, Feed Our Future and Stacey Vandeveld, she was the one who said, well, as long as the school canteens are operating as usual, our programs are operating as usual, pandemic or not. And she does have a quote, which I thought was a really powerful quote. And because one of the questions I asked is, what is the biggest need for your charity right now? And she said, what we still lack, and the same goes for parents, I'm sure, is quality direct communication from the ministry, Department of Education Services, or schools. And so coming from an organization that is in the schools and has been for years, and to be saying that there's a lack of quality direct communication, I think that's, as I said, a very powerful statement.
Definitely something to look at for sure. Because without that direction, you can be spinning your wheels for quite some time trying to either serve a need that doesn't exist or serve it in a way that does not achieve your ultimate goals as an organization. And the whole point of being nonprofits is really to serve in some capacity. You have a mission and you want to achieve that mission, and that's why you're doing it in the first place. In terms of other stuff going on in education this week, the CXC Regional, they had I call it the big online press conference. It's always at a bad time of day for me to actually watch it. But talk a little bit about that, the significance of that. What exactly do they announce? And, if my kid isn't taking theirs right now, I didn't take theirs recently, how do I find out how Cayman stacked up as though it were a competition?
Certainly. So on Thursday, they had the big press conference in Guyana. And the CXC, which is the Caribbean Examinations Council, and they do the CSEC exams and the CAPE exams, which is Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Exams. I think it's a good acronym, and I'm not really a fan of acronyms. But on Thursday, they released their regional exam results. And then on Friday, students who took these exams in the spring were due to have gotten their scores. So this is kind of a big day in the Caribbean where kids log on and cross their fingers, and then, they either get rewards or otherwise from their parents. So I guess some hallmarks of this year's is the test results were delayed by the pandemic and then the St. Vincent volcano eruption. So we're running about 3 weeks behind where we would have been last year. And if you're marking your calendar for when you might find out about Cayman's results, both country level and school level, last year those were released, and I'm looking it up right now, in November. So I think it was like November 9th or 10th. So I'm kind of looking to hear about it in about a month, maybe beginning of December at the latest.
Yeah, the challenge as a parent, as I like to bring up quite frequently, and my kids, most of my children were in the American system, so it's a bit different, somewhat like waiting for SAT scores to come in. But the results of these tests have a bearing on what choices you make next in terms of planning for your children. Where are they going to go to school next? What are they, where are they headed and what path? So there is a lot of anxiety and pressure around all of that. And the longer the wait, the more uncomfortable it becomes. Now, just to be clear, individual students, they know their scores now, right? It's more the country sort of announcing, here are how those test scores played out. So I don't want to act as though the people themselves don't know. It's just those of us who may not have a child who's taken CXCs. We would just kind of like to see how did our children do, and this is one of those indicators of that.
Correct. And for me, it's interesting because one of the things you want to look out for, especially in COVID, is looking for learning gaps. So if last year's test results, and this goes for the GCSEs, which are the UK ones, and the CXCs, the grade, I don't want to say they were inflated, they were higher than they had been. This is regionally, right, internationally. Overall, the results tended to be higher than they had been in previous years, and they had adjusted the way the way the scores were calculated because of the pandemic. So every time they talk about the test results last year, they'd say, and here's a salt shaker because this is kind of a new way to do it. But in terms of looking at how the students are doing compared to previous years, I always kind of look within a 10-year time frame. And regionally, the scores were in both English and math were far lower than they were last year. And the English pass rate was the lowest in 2018. And the math pass rate, this is regionally, was the lowest it had been since 2013. So we'll see if Cayman follows that trend, or since we were able to keep our schools open all year, maybe we did better.
Yeah, but it sometimes isn't as simple as the in-person or the virtual or the combination. I mean, we do have to bear in mind that there is an additional layer of stress that has happened as a result of the pandemic, which may have an impact on students' learning and performance, because it's been a rather chaotic couple of years. Even when we were in our safe bubble in Cayman, I shouldn't say that, but I can't help it, the bubble. There is still the anxiety of having friends and loved ones in other places that you're concerned about. You're seeing headlines, you can't visit people. We've had funerals that people couldn't go to. There's just been so many factors that aren't just about learning that can impact the ultimate outcome. So, I always like to let me first blame the teachers, and let me first blame the administrators, and then my kid somewhere in there, and then me down at the bottom, because, I could do no wrong. But there is a lot going on that has an impact on how well the kids can perform. And also, too, there's just going to be some natural fluctuations anyway, based on, the types of kids and their ability to learn the way they're taught that year. Those things change.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's important to, for me, to put as big a table as I can with as much information as possible, and just kind of build on that from year to year, because you need to look at these things almost like, I think, like three-year rolling average.
Yeah.
Which is just so fascinating, right?
Well,
3-year rolling averages.
I kind of make fun of you, right, for this, but the truth is I really do appreciate the context that data over time provides. It's just that when I try to do it myself, I get bored and I start coloring the boxes in different colors. And then I forgot to put the code that matches the colors. And so my data is now useless. But I do truly appreciate what it just provides a greater sense of context. And so I'm less likely to make a snap judgment about what's going on this time. I still say you look for warning signs, you look for problems, like you said, learning gaps. You still identify potential issues, but there's a difference between doing that and then, proceeding thoughtfully forward, as opposed to overreacting and completely changing the way you do things because it's a failure. So I just think that data over time kind of helps keep the flibbertigibbets like myself kind of, less likely to decide that we're all going to learn under a tree this year or we're all going to learn off the computer. Just helps provide a little context and balance. It's good. The borders reopening conversation, I wanted to bring up a bit as, we've already seen some outbreaks in local schools, and at the government press briefing last week, the hint that we will know very soon what's happening next was promised. We got the promise of a promise of a promise, as I think young Giovanni Ebanks said in one of his social media posts, which was rather amusing. The thing about that is, though, that some of the things that we've avoided for quite some time having to deal with are now going to be more. There is more of that to deal with as we look at the borders reopening. We look at more people coming in and out of the country. So there's a lot that lies ahead on that front. We could hear as early as next week, when that's going to happen. But the potential impact on schools could be even greater than what we just saw the last, 2 months, maybe?
Yeah, and last week, Mark Ray, the director of Department of Education Services, put out a video statement where he talked about kind of the school's response to COVID. And at one point that was interesting to me is he touted the effectiveness of the remote learning that they put into place. Mm-hmm. But he said, despite the effectiveness of remote learning, there will be instances where this may not be the recommended approach.
Yeah.
And that was it. So you go, oh, so even though virtual learning is effective, which would mean you close the physical school and you teach classes online, sometimes we may not do that. And he pointed to I
read it completely different. I'm such a like a little bit of a fangirl, right, for Mark Ray. So whatever he says, it's wonderful to me. But I did read this a little differently than you. What I heard them say, I feel like we're in therapy. What I heard them say was, just so you know, we're sorted out. Everything's fine. We can do it this way, no problem. We tested it out with Georgetown Primary. We know what we need to do. However, we don't believe virtual learning is the answer. We would rather keep them in class if we can, but we'll do what we must if we need to.
Yeah.
See,
but he followed it up by saying that's why we put the schools on extended midterm break with no virtual learning.
Well,
so I took it as meaning we've got remote learning in place, but that may not be what we do.
Yeah.
Full stop. Hopefully we'll have Mr. Ray on and we can.
Well, I need to keep harassing him. Sorry, my microphone fell off. I have to keep harassing him about that.
Yeah, just no means no, unless.
I just think that it means we are sometimes going to play things by ear based on where we are and what's going on. We have lots of tools in the toolkit, and we'll use the appropriate ones at the appropriate time. But there is no one-size-fits-all solution. I clearly drink the Kool-Aid on this one, though, because I don't like to be forced into having a one-size-fits-all solution. I believe sometimes there are things going on behind the scenes that maybe people don't know about. So in let's say it's the radio station, right? And because, my other life, I'm at Radio Cayman. People will say, well, why isn't this particular thing on the air? And I'm like, well, here's what happened. I was running with the audio to the thing, and then I fell, and then I smashed the SD card, and it's not on the air. So I really don't want to spend a bunch of time explaining that it's not there because of such and such. I'm just going to move on to the next thing. But, I had a reason for why the thing didn't happen. So yes. I'm just saying sometimes the circumstances behind the scenes are more complicated. And sometimes the people in the position to share that information don't always do that. But I think it can be helpful to say, yeah, we have all the right resources in the right place, but we're actually not comfortable doing this 100% just yet. Or we know that by the time we got parents and students acclimated to this couple of days trigger, early start or week or whatever it may be, we don't have enough teachers who have what they need at home to be able to do it too. Or it worked great at Georgetown Primary, but that doesn't mean all the other places are ready to do it yet. So I'm just saying there's always like a bunch of things going on. And very rarely do we hear what the detailed things are in the middle of, a crisis, if you will. But that's just me being nice because I really like my great Department of Education.
Well, I think this key phrase that they use, learning to live with COVID, like it means living with COVID, like people are going to be getting COVID. Yeah. And if you recall, when the pandemic started, they talked a lot about flattening the curve. So it seemed to me at the beginning of this whole thing, the kind of the assumption was everybody's going to be exposed to it, and a lot of people are going to get it, and some people are going to get sick. But what we need to do is make sure the hospital system and the healthcare system doesn't get overwhelmed, so that somebody's appendix bursts and there's no bed because somebody's sick or denying cancer patients that they need. But Cayman was so successful in eliminating it from our community for the time being that it's almost like the goalposts shifted and they've got to shift again. I was talking to my brother, who's a doctor in Houston, Texas, in the U.S., and I was telling him about COVID cases in school, and he laughed and he told me his son had 3 notes from school that day notifying them of 3 separate COVID cases in the class, and they just kind of look at it and go, throw it in the garbage.
So different.
Yeah, they've just gotten used to it. They said, well, that's COVID. It's like hearing somebody has the flu, they got the flu. Oh.
And I know that, when you look back in, your rear view mirror, we may analyze the situation very, very differently in a couple of years. Looking back, did we overreact? Did we underreact? There's always a lot of that. But when you're dealing with public health issues, it's so tricky, in my view, particularly where young people are concerned. You have this, urge to protect that may sometimes be disproportionate to the risk. I can't say that that's true in the case of COVID because I've been here pretty much the whole time. So my experience of COVID is very odd. It's almost a surreal thing. It didn't actually happen. I'm dealing with the consequences of suppression efforts, but the actual people getting sick and stuff, I don't know a thing about that other than what I may have seen, on my phone. So I think
my parents got it. One of my brothers got it, and thankfully it was not. It was practically low symptom, mild symptoms. But you get that anxiety. Of course, you get the positive. And you go, ooh, the next 72 hours is going to be really, really dicey.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that I don't have to have this problem at any point, but.
We've got the vaccine. People in Cayman has a very high vaccination rate. I mean, very, very high. And people here aren't being ridiculous about, equating freedom with not having to wear a mask. And even the people who don't want to wear a mask, like, I don't want to wear a mask. Who cares, right?
Yeah.
There's some debate on the appropriateness of it at the schools.
Well,
but I think it's been very civilized level
debate. Yeah.
Yes.
And if I don't like that you're not wearing a mask, I can either tell you person to person, right? Or I just stay 12 feet away from your butt, you know what I mean? I do kind of feel like, you have some personal choice and personal responsibility or personal irresponsibility, depending on how you look at it all.
I think horse sense, as they say, has largely prevailed here, where people are just trying to get on with it and be respectful. So I think Cayman is in as good a position as anywhere else in the world, and probably as good a position to handle this as could be imagined theoretically.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hoping that you're right. So anything else? Anything else?
No, that's it.
I was like, I thought I
Ready,
had
ready for
something else.
vacation.
Vacation. No such thing. No such thing. So we've just not talked
I have
about the
7 kids in the house right now.
we have not talked about the elephant in the room either. You got to just show your hair, Patrick. You got to go to the
Oh,
sides.
yeah.
Yeah, Patrick is no longer my hair twin, man.
I sold out.
You gave up.
Yeah. I
It,
told my wife, that's 10 minutes of my life every day I'll get back. And then she just,
it'll extend many years on the other end.
yeah.
Well, it looks good. And my daughter, who says we look like twins now, it's going to be funny if she doesn't make me like get my hair cut too, so that we can still be the like twins from completely different families. It'll work. All right. So thanks so much, Patrick. And guys, we'll see you next week. If there's anything exciting going on you want us to talk about, we're happy to do it too. Otherwise, Patrick is going to like do the next EDBEAT like from beside the pool while his kids frolic merrily outside, having a lovely break. That's what I think is going to happen anyway, in my mind.
Yes. The Brady Bunch.
All right. Have a great one, everybody. And we'll see you next time right here on EDBEAT.